Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Silverberg, and today I'll be presenting my social issue persuasive presentation. The issue that I have chosen to discuss is same-sex / LGBTQ marriage and why it took so many years for it to become legal. And even though that it is legal now, some people still do not accept them as they are and do not believe that they have a right to be married or even happy. Some of the statistics that I found when researching this topic had to do with the timeline that had to do with same-sex marriage. Some of those dates were September 21st of 96. President Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act, which banned the federal recognition of same-sex marriage as a legal union between a man and woman as husband and wife, which I think was crazy. Another few dates that I found were December 20th of 1999 was that Vermont ruled that same-sex couples should have the same right as heterosexual couples, and they were the first state to rule that. However, they were not the first to legalize. The first state to actually legalize was Massachusetts on May 17th of 2004. With that being said, some of the other statistics that I found was in 2009, only 37% of U.S. adults favored same-sex marriage, and in 2017, that number moved up to 62%. However, in 2019, it went down to 61%. When we talk about what age groups look like, the age groups are from 1928 to 1945, and of that period, only 45% support them. When you talk about 1981 to 1996, that number goes up to 74%. There's also 29 countries that allow same-sex marriage. When I question why people do not support their marriage and their community itself, some of the reasons that I found was that children hunger for their biological parents. They don't understand why they were left behind, why their parents didn't want them, rather than recognizing the parents that they have. Another fact that I found was children who grow up without fathers hit puberty early, and those children who are women are most likely to get pregnant as teenagers. Others are children need mothers for emotional security, especially when they're infants. They can also help their daughters through puberty. When it comes to the emotional support, they just know what they're thinking and how they're going through their life, and so they're there and they're easier to support them. There's other researches that also support that parenting for same-sex couples might be inadequate and harder because they don't know what their child is going through. They don't necessarily know what it's like to grow up with two parents of the same sex. They're going through this new, never before, maybe like the parents are. When you also thought of the term marriage, it thrived when spouses specialize in gender-typical ways rather than calling themselves partners. When you think of the word partners, you think of same-sex marriage, but when you think of the word marriage, you think of a man and a woman, which is an issue back then. When researching, I also found some pros and some cons about the topic of same-sex marriage. Some of the ones that I found was that same-sex marriage in order to legalize it, it was easier for them to adopt children, since for the adoption agency, you need to have a marriage license to make it easier on yourself. If you don't have a marriage license, you can still adopt, but the process will take longer and they'll require more documents rather than having a license says that you're married to one another. It is also against the law for any adoption agency to turn them away if they have a legalization to their marriage to each other. Another thing is that they'll be able to own joint property, so they'll be able to own their house together rather than buying the house separately, and whoever bought the house is who owns it. Another thing is like when a death occurs, it's easier for them to get the Social Security. They're able to get the parental rights and taxes of their deceased spouse rather than having to fight the family over that because you were not legally married to them. Some of the cons that I also found was that you do not have to have formalities. With that being said, you don't have to have court hearings or documents to say that you are together and you're able to be together and you're able to break up without having to go to court and getting documents signed. Another one that I found was you leave the relationship with what you came in it with. With that being said, when you marry someone and you get divorced, you have to split property and money, anything that was accumulated during that time of being together and time of being married, you have to split it 50-50. When you aren't married, you don't have to do that. You just take what you brought into it and you take it out. Some of the facts that I looked up for solutions was that some of the famous couples that we look about nowadays that have thrived through their same-sex marriage. Some of those are Neil Patrick Harris, Colton Haynes, Ellen DeGeneres, Matt Bomer, Tom Daley, Jillian Michaels, Nate Berkus, and Elton John. You can see these, and a lot of them have children. They've been married for years. They're thriving, and they're having a wonderful life. We can look at these couples and see that their lives are no different than any of a man and woman marriage. They're living their lives, they're being successful, and they're not afraid to hide who they are. One of the solutions that I think that we should be able to do is we should be able to teach people about their history of like why same-sex marriage isn't legal, but also the history of discrimination itself. We can find that 20% of LGBTQ Americans have experienced discrimination when applying for jobs. 22% of them are not paid equally. With that being said, discrimination is still happening. When I looked up examples of it, I found on USA Today that this woman, Beverly, and her wife were rejected from living community just because they were married to each other. And that is an issue that shouldn't happen. And the question is, what can we do about LGBTQ discrimination? One thing that I thought of for another solution is that we can pass a federal law and enforce it. A website that I found said that such a law would curtail years and years of trench warfare between supporters and opponents of LGBT equally. With that being said, yes, it could enforce and entail a big disagreement between communities. However, with this law, there would be no excuses for refusing service or marriage license on the basis of religious belief. This will also help the Supreme Court with cases about LGBTQ community. And also, while the Supreme Court may have more complaints, they can chop it up to, this is the federal law and you must obey it. With that being said, this is one of the big issues that I believe is important, and I hope y'all do too. Thank you for listening.